Hello and welcome to another Doctor's Assistant 1 video, and today I'm doing a video on why I like Doctor Who, The Unquiet Dead. It's only the third episode in the new series, all the way back in 2005 if you can believe it, and I think this is a very important episode in terms of the fact that it's the first ever historical since the show came back, and also when you think about it, between Unquiet Dead and the last historical, there's been a massive gap in terms of historicals, because I think the last proper pure historical / historical-esque episode technically, and I think officially, was all the way back in Peter Davison's era, being the Black Orchid. So from Black Orchid you go all the way to Unquiet Dead. There's a massive gap. I guess if you class the Big Finish stuff, then, because that is technically canon now, there's probably historicals in there, so actually it's not as big a gap, but in terms of at least in the television format, there's that massive gap. So Unquiet Dead, in retrospect, at least now with me having the foreknowledge of classic Who and that, probably had such a big job on its hand in terms of people's expectations, fans' expectations of what modern Doctor Who could do in terms of going back into the past. And I think this is a superb episode. I do like this episode. It's really simplistic, but it's one of those episodes where, although it's really simplistic, it's extremely effective, and even though it's simplistic, it's not boring or dull. I think there are a lot of instances where the modern series does a simple story, but literally just does it so sort of paint by numbers in a way that it's like dull and boring, and it's from point A to point B and that's it. Like, although this is basic and simple in retrospect, I think it's very still interesting and still feels like it's got that depth and that layer to it. It's odd. But it's very interesting to hear in the commentary in Series 1 that I listened to a while back, and that Mark Gatiss said that Russell T Davies had said that, like, imagine the pre-title sequence when that bit finishes, and imagine that being like the equivalent of a classic Doctor Who cliffhanger. That's what you need to do. And I guess that's why there's that bit where there's that woman who just like walks out of the the funeral house place, and then he's like, and there's all those Gelf like blue, and that is freaky, but it's also very classic Doctor Who-esque, as I say, because it's like a cliffhanger almost, but then it cuts from that to the title sequence and that, and the TARDIS and Time Vortex and all that, and you just feel like, yeah, this is a true Doctor Who adventure, and yeah, although the sets and or location and that is very simplistic, like, you don't get too many, like, it's not, the scope isn't there, like, say, Deep Breath, but I genuinely think, although the scope, in comparison to Deep Breath, the scope is, like, year big, I think the narrowness and or sort of budget and the limits of this episode, and that, I think, make it stronger as a story and more contained as a story. I think art, whether it's video games, music, or in this case TV, I think art sometimes works better when there's restrictions to it, because it hones in what it truly is going to be about, and this is about Charles Dickens, it's about the Gelf. I think my major critique and or criticism of this story might be that there needs to be a healthy balance between the historical figure and the alien type monster, because often you can get episodes where, you have the Daleks, for example, in Victory of the Daleks, and then you have, the historical figure kind of just a little bit below hand, or in Vincent van Gogh's episode, Vincent and the Doctor, you have the historical figure and then the monster pretty much non-existent. in this case, I think the balancing could have been better. I think, in retrospect, my major criticism could be that Charles Dickens could have been in the story more, but as I say, the only problematic thing with that is if you move the limelight from the monsters and more onto the historical figure, then you lose the limelight on the monsters, so it's finding that balance. But for modern Doctor Who's first outing into history, I think it's a superb episode, and it does it brilliantly and phenomenally. I mean, that first shot where you see Rose step out of the TARDIS, and she just steps on the snow even, and that was insane to me as a child, being able to just step into this whole new world that is history, and they explain it perfectly. They encapsulate what that clearly feels like from our perspective, i.e. Rose's perspective, and we feel the same way. She's like there, like, days gone by, sunsets that have been lost for years, you can go back to them and touch them and open the doors and be part of days gone dead, and by, and that. And there's a bit of overall story arc thread stuff, but it doesn't get bogged down in that. It's so subtle and it's so, minute in terms of the whole episode. I would say, like, out of 100% of the episode, I'd say not even 10% of the episodes is overall story arc stuff. It's more like maybe 5%, so 95% of the episode is just its own thing. So it's, even though it has a bit of a reference to the bad wolf and the big bad wolf type thing when Gwyneth says that, that's about it. Supporting cast are superb. Mr. Sneed, brilliant. Gwyneth, superb. Eve Miles is brilliant here. First outing. Rose is really good, and she's not bitchy, she's not whiny. The zombie-like creatures are just creepy and eerie and weird to me. And I think in terms of this story, aesthetically, it is very chilling. It is very gothic horror-esque. It feels very Tom Baker-esque in that respect. It feels very, Talons of Wang Chiang, because it is Victorian, well, I'd say London, but it's Victorian Wales, Cardiff, and that, which I thought was hilarious. The Doctor's brilliant in this. There's a lot of friction between Rose and the Doctor about the morals and ethics of this. Is it right to have these aliens just slip into these dead corpses of humans? Rose thinks it's not fair and not right because obviously they're her people and her dead people of sorts, whereas the Doctor, I guess, as an alien, he can distance himself. He's very cold and very aggressive as well to Charles Dickens, which I thought was very surprising, because especially at the time I probably thought that, because Charles Dickens is this historical character who is a genius, essentially, and in terms of his writing, and yet here's this character sort of shunning him away because he's just adamant that this is a lie, what's happening. But the Doctor's like, no, if you're going to waste my time, shut up, and then he apologises, like, oh, well, okay, I shouldn't have said, to shut up, but you were being a bit of a pudding brain. He doesn't say pudding brain, not until his 12th incarnation, but that's not the point. He apologises, but, he's so adamant that, you kind of cheesed me off because you're a brilliant human being and have, an amazing mind, and yet you can't believe what's right in front of you type thing, And yeah, I think the actor who plays Charles Dickens was superb as well, phenomenal. The setting was well done. As I say, I think the setting, there isn't as much depth there as, say, a future episode like Deep Breath or maybe even Crimson Horror and other stories that have been set in Victorian times. But for a first outing, I think at the time it probably was a lot better, whereas now I'm looking back on this story and that more critically, because obviously in retrospect it just doesn't look as, like the sets or the settings, even like that place where Charles Dickens is in a place where there's that woman and we first see the Gelth. It looks basic, and I think the best set designed place is probably the mortuary, I think it's called, and that where Gwyneth is in, and spoiler alert, she gets killed, and that is so gut-wrenchingly sad, and it's so well directed. The music is subtle but is very eerie. The Gelth are creepy and a brilliant one-off monster. The zombie-like creatures are devastatingly eerie and creepy, and suit the Gelth and the zombie-esque characters suit the setting of Victorian London very well. It all seamlessly blends together. So with all of those positives, what do I give Unquiet Dead? I would easily give Unquiet Dead a 10 out of 10. It is a perfect story to me. It is what I want from a historical story. A good historical figure that, really good and acted well by a good actor, has a decent amount in the limelight, but to be fair, he could have had more, I think. But again, that was a bit of an issue, but then he would have been taken away from the Gelth. The Gelth are superb. The zombie-like creatures are eerie. Gwyneth is amazing. Mr. Sneed is Mr. Sneed, really. Is good. And I can't believe there was that bit where some person snapped his neck. You hear the snapping of his neck, and then that eerie bit where he's like risen up and he's like, got those like zombie eyes, those blue eyes. This is a pretty dark story, and episode 3 in the new series, that must have been a bold and really big, sort of bold decision on their part to do that. I mean, it was very dark. I think this is easily, from 2005 to 2016, easily, what is it? Not Stephen. I was going to say Stephen Moffat's then. Mark Gatiss' best story in terms of television and or the new series. In terms of his portfolio in the new series, I think Unquiet Dead is Mark Gatiss' best story. 10 out of 10 from me. There are a few bits here and there that I think could have been ironed out, but overall, costume design, Rose looks superb. I like the bit that the doctor's like, oh my god, you look amazing, considering, and she's like, considering what? Well, you're human. I like that bit because obviously it shows that although the doctor said that she looks nice, he doesn't see her that way. It's more like a father-daughter relationship than anything else, which I personally think's the better sort of relationship of the two characters personally, and I think it should have continued like that going into the 10th Doctor, but unfortunately it didn't. It's just iconic Doctor Who. I think this is what I grew up with, so maybe I'm just nostalgic for it. It is a very basic story, but I think basic sometimes works. It's sometimes effective, and this is a superb example of a simplistic and basic story done really well, which still felt like it had layers and depth and interesting dialogue and interesting sort of intense scenes of sort of villains trying to attack people and or snap people's necks, and or this still feels like a threat even though the Doctor's going to get out of it, because I've seen the episode a dozen times, but it still felt interesting and fresh as well. So yeah, 10 out of 10 from me. Thanks for watching. Comment, rate and subscribe.